Level Up Latina partners with working women and mamas alike to guide them in achieving fulfilling career and life goals through financial empowerment, professional or leadership coaching, and personal wellness. Find the unique coaching you need to succeed.
You're listening to Vero, Ceci, and Irene, and we are Level Up Latina.
Hola, hola. Welcome to another episode of the Level Up Latina podcast. Today we are recording episode 218, and today we have a cool discussion. Today's episode is called The Case of the No Sabo Kid. So before we get into it, primero más que nada quería decir buenos días, ¿cómo están mis amigos del alma? Let's do a little check-in.
I'm excellent. I'm having a delicious cafecito that I have spilled, so I got to see some of the chaos when I got here. Let's see what else. I'm feeling good on this Friday. This is one of those weeks que Monday was a holiday, so you know how I feel about those weeks. Que ni sé los días en que vivo. So bad that our girlfriend was coming into town, Lise, and I thought she meant next Thursday. She meant this Thursday. I'm like a hot mess. I was in 1 week off, pero I think I clarified that, but otherwise I'm good.
¿Y tú, Vero?
Sorry, I started getting a cough attack with just hearing you introduce yourself, introduce the topic of this episode. Yo ando con una tos todavía bien feyona. Like there's like just, it's a phlegm attack on my throat.
Yeah.
Y me sale de una. I'll be fine. And then all of a sudden it's like, sorry, this phlegm needs to interrupt whatever you're saying. But so far so good. It's been a very busy morning. I'm like, I cannot have my kids again interrupt our conversation at the podcast. So it took a little bit longer to deliver them to my mom, but here we are. I'm excited to be back and talk about this topic that is, I think, very relevant to us, especially now that we're raising second generation little rugrats, you know? So it's gonna be a good topic of discussion. So I'm excited to see you girls.
I like how you said deliver them to my mom, the kids. I know what you...
Girl, yes.
Yes, I know. And I know what you mean, Irene. I feel like the last 2 weeks we've been kind of off, like on the days or whatever, this week because it was a holiday. Yo ahorita me siento cansada, I think because I've only had like half of my coffee. It hasn't fully kicked in. But I feel excited about today, about the weekend. I'm basically partying it tonight and tomorrow night también, so a ver cómo aguanto. But yeah, no, I was excited, I think, to bring this topic to the table. I know we were having like an offline discussion about this, and mainly because what's going on ahorita con este grupo, Yahritza y Su Esencia. I believe they're second generation, or they might be first generation, but in light of like us being first gen and having second generation kids where like Spanish is no longer their first language, things like that. I think we wanted to bring it to the table and just kind of have a general discussion about it. I know in the case of all three of us, we're first gen, and we had to do a lot of interpreting for our parents. I know in my case, because I'm the oldest, and I think because of that, my Spanish is pretty decent. I never took Spanish classes. My Spanish was pretty decent, puedo entender, puedo escribirlo sin acentos, I'm not all there grammatically, pero me defiendo, and I think that's the same case with all three of us. But now we have kids that were born here. They're not required, and they're not, they don't need to be interpreting for us. So para ellos es más fácil, y están estudiando en inglés, so para ellos es más fácil just everything in English, bueno, cuando empiezan a la escuela, I know, in my case with the girls, it was Spanish up until they started school. But I guess let's start off with like just talking about like what was our experience with the language, with Spanish growing up, and was it something que se les dio fácil o algo que, perhaps we had to put a little bit more effort, or was it challenging, I guess, growing up and speaking the language at home or with others?
I love this question. I love this topic. I was just writing a chapter in a book that I'm reading about like being a no sabo kid, and I had this realization that like I actually was a no sabo kid growing up, and I had that realization the other day talking to my kids, and I was just like, that is so true. Like I would have totally have done this. I kept framing this thing that happened with this girl as my kids would have done it, and I realized I would have done it. I would have been this girl that was out of touch, didn't speak Spanish well. And we'll get into the details. We'll get into the details. You asked about our history, but it really sat with me. And I thought about it that The reason I felt like a no sabo kid is because I was growing up with English and Spanish. And so my siblings spoke English. Like my brother named me Irene because of an Irene he knew, not because we knew someone because of my Irene. I got like lucky. Like, what if we would have known like a Dusty Destiny and my name would have been Destiny? Like something completely
Destiny,
American.
destiny.
Exactly. And spelled it wrong. Like we know we do. So I realized like growing up, my English was actually better than my Spanish because my Spanish was just terrible. Like my mom was uneducated and like she spoke it. So it got better. But I was thinking back to in college when I hung out with Lisette and I would go hang out with her family. Me trababa tanto. My Spanish was terrible. I wouldn't speak as much because I was embarrassed. And you forget all those things, right? You forget all those things about your life. And suddenly out of nowhere, like you all, Level Up Latina has like changed my Spanish. Traveling has changed my Spanish. Traveling when I studied abroad really changed my Spanish because I felt when I was in Latin America, like I was it. And I had this confidence to like figure it out. Listening to Spanish music, watching Spanish media. I love Spanish music because it really did change my vocabulary. I do mean when I say to the kids that like, it's okay. Like we're gonna sound silly, dumb. We're not gonna know the words. We're gonna have to find a way, but we got to put ourselves out there. But I was a no sabo kid, and I now looking back on it, my Spanish is like excellent, and I get a lot of love and praise. And it's funny because last thing I'll say about that, my mom wanted me to pray once in front of her prayer group. And she's like, "Tú puedes, sí podrás." Es que no, el español como que no. I was like, "Mom, I can read in Spanish." And I think I already shared that with you guys once before in the podcast. But I was thinking it's because my family probably remembers the little no sabo kid. That my Spanish was a hot mess. Don't ask me to spell with accents, by the way, still to this day. And I had to take a Spanish class to graduate college, by the way, and I did decent. But I realize now that I feel so much empathy for this young girl that just was out of place. I think culturally she was out of place. Has nothing to do with the language. But we are missing something when we're between both worlds.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Thank you. ¿Y tú, Vero?
Pues al igual, mis papás no fueron, they didn't go to, I think they probably went up to first and second grade. They were rancho kids, right? When they immigrated, when they came to the U.S., they had been working. My mom had moved from her rancho at the age of 14 to Guadalajara to work, and she was escaping getting robada, que se la robaran. You know, and so her experience was a little different. She's like, I'm leaving home because I don't want to get married. I don't want to be my sister que se la robaron a los 12 años. And that, to me, it's like you're stealing a child, you know?
Desde ese punto, una madre increíble. Amazing.
She's something, I think that's why she also allowed me to be me. So that's ese es un cuento para otra historia.
Yeah.
But my mom moving to Guadalajara and experiencing, you know, she had to like trabajaba and when she would work, she had a job, but then she also was staying at a tío's house. And she's like, she just didn't feel comfortable just living there, even though she was working. So she would take on these responsibilities. And I see that in her now, of how she acts, and like she just can't stay put. You know, she needs to constantly be doing something because she thinks she's being judged. So with my mom, when she moved to the States, it was de casualidad. She was just, you know, she came to visit her sister in Tijuana and they happened to look alike. And my mom's like, they're like, hey, try my passport. See if you can cross the border. So my mom crossed the border with my tia's passport. And she calls over and she's like, pues crucé, ahora qué hago? Y le hace mi tía, well, quédate unos meses, ve a conocer. And then my mom never went back. That was in the early 70s. My mom didn't go back. My mom to this day doesn't speak any English, right? A little bit, because she would talk to our neighbor that was her BFF. They would always just check in. My dad, también de rancho, like mean rancho. My dad, like both of them. Mean rancho came here, tried 3 times, almost drowned ahí cruzando las playas de Tijuana. All these things. My dad worked in construction, and my dad really never learned también English, just enough to get by in his work sites. So for me, even though my brother and my sister were like 8 and 7 years older than me, or 7 and 6 years older, 7 and 6 years older than I was, at home, I would sometimes hear them speak English when my parents weren't listening, but my dad would always say that when you come through this house, like that front door, not even the front door of the house, the gate, right? En cuanto un pie toque aquí la propiedad, me hablan español.
Español, yeah.
Because my dad was worried that we would go back to Mexico and we wouldn't be able to talk and speak to our grandparents and our cousins and our tíos and our tías. So I think now that I'm a mom, entiendo eso todavía más. So I didn't realize I didn't know great Spanish until I traveled to Querétaro. So even when I went with my family, we were fine. Because nos decía, ay, esta pochita, qué chistosa, lo que sea, you know? But it wasn't until I went to Querétaro, which was definitely not a rancho town. It wasn't like what I was used to. I was in school. I was doing, you know, actual, UCSB courses, but in Mexico, that I first realized that, ay chingado, I don't know what they're talking about. They were using English, like Spanish, like en español, estaban hablando bien, no de que lo que aprendiste en first and second grade and to get by for the rest of your life. But these people were like, ubícate. That was the first time I learned how to say, like, what ubícate meant. And I'm like, ay Dios, ¿qué es eso? So, of course, I had to, find that, look it up. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what it is. And then until I was fully immersed in something like that I realized, dang, whatever I learned, I learned how to read and write in Spanish sola, at home with my mom, by myself. I would ask my mom questions like, ¿es fonético? Todo como se escribe, como se escucha, se escribe. So my mom taught me how to read and write it, but everything else was like, what? I don't know anything else. Then the next time I felt very uncomfortable in my Spanish was when I decided to take on the double major, the Spanish major, the Spanish minor in literature and language. And we were learning how, los sonidos, donde van los acentos, cómo es cada acento, y agudo, ¿qué es agudo? I was like, ¿qué fregados es esto? And that's when I really felt I had this connection because of lo hablaba, pero no tenía el nivel que dirías para una persona que está en la universidad to really get by. And I noticed that, once I hit, de Querétaro, and then I went back to do my research at Mexico, at UNAM, and then to the Universidad de Yucatán. And it was just like, this is different. So I felt that, wow, my Spanish was great until it was tested at like academic levels. And that's when I was like, ugh, this is rough.
Well, for me, I'm the oldest. I'm like the oldest cousin. I'm like the first of everything. I mean, my parents were like the pioneers that came to this country first from like, at least from my mom's side. And so I was like the first oldest cousin that was like learning English and whatnot. And I remember going back to Mexico y era que la novedad, a ver, di algo en inglés, di algo en inglés. And I remember like specifically like, a ver, mándale un saludo a tu tío Siragüen. El nombre nada que ver, right? And I was like, yo no sé cómo decir eso, su nombre, Siragüen. But anyway, I don't remember exactly at what point I started translating and interpreting for my parents, because igual ellos, they only went up to 6th grade, Aquí también, they would go, ocasionalmente iban que a clases de inglés taught like, at night and stuff like that, but they weren't consistent. Like, people get busy, they worked jobs, and so, pues no se les dio poder regresar. I think I told you guys recently that me que encontré, like, remember the Inglés sin Barreras, like, still nuevo en el garage when we were, like, moving them out? Yeah, so nunca lo aprendieron bien. Igual, como ustedes, like, enough to defenderse en el trabajo and things like that, but not enough to have, like, a full-on conversation and understand the whole thing. So I was the interpreter, and I remember, again, I don't remember exactly when was the first time, but I remember always being the interpreter and being pulled out when my dad would go meet with his lawyer, who that became my boss later on in life. But it was them. It was just like, shit, like, ¿cómo le hago? Like, a huevo tenía que, to figure out what the words were that I was trying to translate, like legalese and what they meant. So, por ahí me acuerdo, like, just having to do that and wanting to make sure that my parents understand what was going on. And that went on for years and years. And then I guess at the point when I went to college, then my sister became that person, right? Because my sister and I were talking about recently, like, how her and I speak better Spanish than my younger brother, than Manny. And it's like, dude, because a Manny nunca le tocó, like, let me be the one, let me call these places. And like, to this day, it's my sister and I that my sister does anything that's like local for my parents. And me, I think, these last 3 days, I've been getting calls from like each of their doctors. Like, I'm the one that the doctors call. And so hasta la fecha. And I was listening to, I think it was Nelly Galan in her book. She was saying how when you grow up being the interpreter for your parents all these years as a grown-up, you continue doing all these things for them because it's almost like a duty that's ingrained in you. Like, ya te sale ya de la naturaleza, like, okay, let me handle this, let me figure this out. So that's been my experience, like, and it continues, and I know it's gonna, seguir con mis papás, where the benefit that our kids have is que, we know the language, and we don't have to rely, necessarily on our kids. So it's it's kind of like a topic that we've been talking about, like we're breaking molds, and even culturally too with the language, like que nuestros hijos ya no tienen la necesidad de interpretar and to be there and calling all these places for us. Pero ya going back to esta muchacha también, I'm of the opinion that I don't think it was disrespectful lo que dijo, right? De México. I think they just, social media could be cruel. They're like canceling them y toda esta cosa.
For anybody listening, do you want to hear exactly qué pasó or what she said?
Este es un grupo de 3 hermanos, a young lady and I think two brothers. They're from Washington. I don't know if they're first generation or second generation. Si ustedes saben.
I believe they are first generation because they tell the story about how they were undocumented because one of their brothers was separated because of his legal status. So I believe they are kids that maybe were either brought here very young or half of them weren't born here, something like that. So they're definitely first generation from the vibe that I'm getting. Okay. So then they either were born or have grown up in Washington. And if it's in the case that you were saying que, they might have been undocumented, then perhaps they have never had the opportunity to go back to Mexico, right? So that's one. And then they've, obviously known all their lives is just English aquí and no han regresado a su país. Ahora regresaron, so I could see where to them it was a cultural shock, just hearing everyone in Spanish, seeing, la comida que comen. So they were being interviewed in Mexico. I think they were in Mexico City, and they were asking them like, oh, ¿cómo les está gustando Mexico? How are you liking Mexico? And they responded and said like, oh, like I just, I'm trying to go to sleep and there's like, loud noises outside, que sirens y que eso y que el otro. And then they were saying like the food, que no les había gustado tanto. And so de allí, se agarraron las social media outlets and they just like went on them hard. Don't come back. They were being canceled. They se me hizo bien cruel because son chiquillos, they're like adolescentes. So the way they responded se me hace muy cruel. Segundo, again, this is all they know. They're just up and coming, like igual they probably don't have a PR person que les está guiando. And then lastly, it's just like things that you don't see here in the US, that in Mexico, like igual yo me quejo, I'm like, ay, like soy un ruidazal, like no se puede dormir. I was telling you ladies like recently, like, ay, estábamos ahí en el pueblo con mis suegros and we could not go to sleep because there's dogs barking off the hook, people driving with their loudest music, it's so hot, so yo igual cosas que yo me quejo and I don't see it as being disrespectful towards a country. So that's kind of like what my point of view is right now. And I just feel like se pasaron con estos muchachos.
I was actually having this conversation with one of our dear friends, Magali. For me, it was like, I empathize with Yahritza and her siblings. Like, if you have not been to a place that your parents have this anhelo, all you know about Mexico is what you've lived through your parents, through their stories, through what they've experienced. And they've made you value this cultura that you have in your veins, right? Like, they've never been to Mexico. They've brought Mexico to them through what they knew. I think that we're being very much like, the constant thing. How Mexican are you, right? Or how Latino are you? Like, do you really know this? And they're signed with a legit label. They are, and it's a Mexican label. So they're signed with a Mexican label that is, signing chiquillos, in a sense, little kids that are from the United States. And the best you can do, I think, that is prepare them for it. Like, these kids have never been to where you're from. That these kids know that, que tal vez los saquitos de pollo que le hace a su mamá están mejor que los que va a comer en la calle, The thing is that you only get exposed to so much. And they're 16 years old. I mean, y tú me quieres dar un taco taco de lengua, it's different because I love tacos de lengua. Pero me quieres dar un taco de, de ubre, vamos a decir, oh, cómete un taco de ubre. And it's like,
de tripa, dude.
right? Tripa, ubre, like sesos, right? And like, who eats that? But then it's like, pruébalo, es delicioso. And you're like, I don't like this. This is not what I want. Vamos a decir, los llevan a Oaxaca o a Puebla y les dan, grasshoppers and worms. And they're going to be like, the heck is this, right? So I think that behavior is excusable. It should be not in the sense of like, oh, let's cancel, but let's help them. Let's guide them. Like, oh, welcome to Mexico. This is what Mexico is. I think we were more forgiving before, but the Mexico tries to be the US in so many different ways también. Mexico quiere ser el norte. And we've always had the discussion as well. Like, quieren norte, pero no son el norte. And eso del cancel culture, like let it be the norte thing, because sometimes that's even silly. There's the too woke for your own good. I think at one point it reaches a limit, and this maybe my people might not agree with it, but like hay límites. And Mexico trying to be el norte con todo, like calm down. We are a more understanding kind of people. We are more of a like welcoming kind of people. But this really showed how Mexico is still very classist, everything's based on the color of your skin todavía, and that's still being very norte. Okay, that's being the ugly parts of who the United States is. It's what they're embracing within their culture, and it really upsets me because somos una gente mejor que eso. We're a loving, family, nurturing kind of people. And when I saw their reactions to Yahritza and her brothers, and seeing how they were making piñatas of like, making them look like indígenas. Yeah, they are not light-skinned kids. It's all right. But we immediately attack the things that are visible, right? And poor kids, they're little. Pues ella tiene 16. Her siblings are, I think, 18 and like 20-something. But that's still forming, your impression of who you are as a person and how you're going to, show up. So I felt that our Mexican people were very, very cruel, bien culeros, como se dice, pero bien culeros con ellos. And that's a part that we need to understand también as now living in the U.S., that the Mexico that we know is through el anhelo and the love that our parents have for it. And maybe we don't experience it the same. And when we do go, sometimes it might be to our pueblos. It might not be to our ranchitos. It might not be to the cities that our parents grew up in. It's more to touristy places now that we can do the things, right? And it's not going to be the same experience. But the Mexico that we experienced through our parents is one of love, of like, this is where, like I said, el anhelo, they're really holding on to this Mexico that they love, that they have not come back to. And they probably won't, right? Because life here is very different than it is in Mexico, no matter how much you love it. But it's still a very big part of you. So, fueron crueles. I feel bad for those kids.
Yeah.
When I first heard about the whole controversy, I was telling Diego about it. I didn't even realize that I knew this group. I love that song that they sing with. Is it like Grupo Frontera?
Sí,
I'm
esa
always
canción
rocking
está
that
padre.
song because
Yeah.
I already had liked Grupo Frontera. And I think when I was listening to Grupo Frontera with Bad Bunny on Spotify, it would automatically revert to like these top songs, and that was one of them. So it was like this list on Spotify if you listen to Bad Bunny went with that other song that he does with them. So I was jamming out to that song, not even realizing that was the group. So I'm learning about them and hearing about the controversy and trying to figure out what the heck did they actually say? Like, why are they getting dragged? I started to tell Diego the story, and the first thing we kind of reacted to was like, oh, like they make money off of Mexicans and they just insulted them. Like that was the initial gut reaction. Like, this is still the culture you're making money off of. It's not like they're Billie Eilish or Taylor Swift, who do have a big following in Mexico and have concerts there. Like, people would see that, still want to cancel them, right? But could see how they'd be super disconnected from the culture and say something that comes across as ignorant. It's so loud here. People would totally let these white people pass that they are fans of, right? But as Latinos, it was almost as though they were expected to understand Mexico and talk about Mexico in a respectful way. So my first kind of thought was like, oh, they didn't understand their audience. Like, where are their PR people? Like, where are the handlers? Like, where are the people that are supposed to help these kids? So making money off of Mexico and then insulting Mexico, I did feel that sting. Then I thought it got out of control and ridiculous. And I'm more erring on the side of what Vero is saying. Like, come on. Like, it's getting ridiculous. We all make mistakes. We all say the wrong things. 50, 60, 70-year-old artists have messed up and insulted the wrong person. Like, then their age came into play, and society being so focused on dragging and disrespecting them and getting so offended that you like overdo it. Like, I guess they got death threats and their family was threatened, and they are being made to feel so small for making a mistake. And I think that part of society is just ugly no matter where and no matter how. Like, dang, like we are just so quick to tear you down. But that's also celebrity. That's also celebrity. Like any celebrity that's running high, they get torn down. So I guess this is a cautionary tale for anybody coming up, and especially if you're young, like you have to be able to project that these things may happen, stand on your own 2 feet when they do, and try your darndest to come back. Like I can't imagine being their family, their parents. The next immediate thought I had after I thought like, ooh, profiting off of Mexico and insulting Mexico was my son would do it. That was my first original thought. Like, I'm not raising kids that are aware enough. I'm not raising kids that wouldn't say the wrong thing. Isaiah has said the wrong things where I felt he has been culturally out of touch, and I've been gentle and said like, that sounded a little like you're white. We've had those dialogues and those debates and those conversations. He's really come into his own as a Latino on his own, outside of what we've influenced because of his desire to go down the language route and be very good at the language. And he was like in an AP accelerated class as a junior for Spanish. He's been in Spanish classes since he was a 7th grader. It was something we originally have made a rule for our family that they have to take 7 years? No, 6 years of Spanish class, 5 if they finish sooner like Isaiah did. But since we didn't teach them Spanish in our home, we're falling back on the educational route. And it has worked for my son, the oldest. His Spanish is better than mine. He writes better than me. He tutors his sister where he needs to. He understands like sentence grammar in a way that I don't, even the words. I mean, I don't have them now. And I'm a very articulate person, but to speak to language, I don't have that skill. My son does. So he could be such a wonderfully Spanish spoken child, for instance. He's still going to mess up sensitively and culturally because he's not being raised in it and because he may not think about it. So I think of the human side, like my kid would do it. And then I thought further about it. I'm like, I would have done it. I would have said the wrong thing. And I think on every day that I didn't have social media in college and that I didn't have social media in high school, like I am the queen person. And anyone who knew me in high school or in college, like you two can attest to that, would know that I said and did stupid and inappropriate things. I said and did stupid and inappropriate things yesterday. We're human, right? But I definitely did them in my young age. And I definitely did them when I was traveling. I'm sure I've been super insensitive and out of touch. But when you know better, you do better. So I think we have to give these kids a shot. I think we cannot just like destroy their careers now. Like just like Lizzo's gonna bounce back from her thing, and Taylor Swift's bounce back from her thing, and Bad Bunny's Bad Bunny's getting dragged for being with Kendall. Let the man live. Let the man live. He's gonna survive. This man's gonna survive. No one is gonna like hold it against him the next couple of songs, So like I think these kids deserve a chance. I empathize with them too. I think I would have done it. My kids would have done it. But we do need to also be responsible that when we want to have fame and we want to be in front of the camera, we do have to think about our audience and think about our words carry power. And they learned it the hard way. But I think that we should always protect anybody that wants to go into the limelight. Us, we in this podcast, we've already said things that are probably controversial. And
I can
hold against us.
maybe not even controversial, but that we mess up, right? Yo a veces, like, I live in a mom brain, fog brain. Like, just last episode, we were all cracking up at how, like, there's things that we assume that we should know, And I'm, like, platicando allí, and it's, like,
adorable.
The camel's back with the thing. And it's, like, the thing is that for me, like, I sometimes, like, I'm, like, ni de aquí ni de allá. Like, my brain would be like, oh, esto, es esto. But trying to catch up and like we mess up. Like I'm like, but I'm okay putting myself out there and like, you know what? Laugh at me and laugh it up. Don't take yourself too serious and be like, oh shit, I was wrong. You're right. But we need those situations to learn, right? To learn. And for Yahritza y Su Esencia, I feel that it's going to be a very tough learning moment. It's going to be where like, do I want to be back on stage? And there's people showing a lot of support. Like we love you regardless. I remember when Selena will come on with Cristina, and I'm aging myself right there because we also that wasn't Cristina, right? But,
I want my kids to love Selena. I'm always talking about
it. Same.
I always like, I told Sylvia, you should dress for her as Halloween. They're like, who is this mom? And I was like, Selena Gomez? Like, no. Let's keep dating ourselves.
You're like, she's cool too.
Metal?
Yeah.
But I feel that she was very like, Tejana of, Mexican roots, but she was Tejana, and she always was being interviewed by the media, and she would be like, I am muy excited, estoy muy excited. Or she would say, I remember her trying to say caballo, and she had like, there was this.
And the numbers do 14, remember that? Con esta Cristina? 14,
sí.
She's like 14,
She's like, but she would laugh it off. And I think we were less harsh because we were starting to see these young, kids that came from a Latino background being proud of their roots, because for a long time, we were being treated like, hey, it's black and white, gray, like the inner gray, which includes brown, doesn't matter. Like, we didn't have a voice. So for many times we were like, either, well, let's sign up for white, or, because we can't do anything else. So I think it's an unfortunate part of it, but I feel that now that we just had an experience, and this is why I wanted to mention, like, we were more forgiven before. And I think now we need to be the ones that can step up and speak up for these kids. We just went camping for Otto's family reunion, and a lot of his family, they have kids, and the kids don't speak Spanish. So then a lot of the grandmas, the older ones that speak English and Spanish, they're like, oh my God, your kids speak Spanish. Ay, que bien. And then they would go and try to make, one, the kids feel like crap, and two, the parents feel like crap. And when you do those things, one, they are going to have resistance to like my kids, and they're going to have a resistance to how they treat them, because like, oh, se creen mejor. And then there's a resistance to how they even now embrace their own culture, because it shouldn't matter whether you do speak it or not. For me, like, it's been easier for us to like immerse them in Spanish, because everything now programming is in Spanish. If you had your kid 10 years ago, that was a lot harder to do. But we have we have an advantage now that we didn't then. And it's the same before, right? So I felt that it made the parent uncomfortable, and it made the kid uncomfortable. I made sure to, one, talk to the person that made the comment and say, you know what, it's great when we can. When we're able to do that, it is great. But it doesn't take away that these kids are here, guess what, to celebrate this family and where they come from and where they're going as a family, y lo bonito que es la familia. Two, I was like, so don't make them feel bad about it. If they want to learn how to speak Spanish later in life, they will do it. You guys they're smart kids. The other part, the parents. Hey, it really isn't your fault. Some of us are working parents. Some of us don't, we didn't grow up with our parents teaching us how to speak Spanish. Like, there's so many things that go in there. Like, hey, don't feel bad about that. Like, we only get, it's not even like making an excuse like, oh, lucky us because we have this programming. But it's like, it was something that for you maybe it wasn't something that was a priority at the moment. But don't feel bad, because it's how you chose to raise your child. But I really felt I had to speak up. I'm like, and it's wrong to try to make someone feel bad. And I would talk to the kids like, hey, you guys, don't feel bad. Like, my kids are trying to learn English, and they're trying to, learn from you guys. So, learn from one another. Like, son familia, quiéranse. Like, it doesn't matter whether you speak English, Spanish, or lo que sepan hablar, but communicate, because you guys can get it done. You guys are kids. Kids are way smarter than adults. And they were just like, thank you. But you could feel that there was like this, like slowly, like que viene una abuelita, un tío. Like, oh God, it was the worst. Like little jabs at kids. Like, no los derroten, ayúdanos. Like,
Yeah,
pero fácil, when it comes to a kid, los podemos derrotar tan fácilmente.
Sí, sí. Y es la familia, sí, que juzga, and it's just like, dude, no se vale.
Yeah, I feel like that Vettel completely described like my family to a T. Like, everybody's worth is kind of determined if they're bilingual or not, and everyone gets praise if they're bilingual from the matriarch. So like, my mom absolutely loves if your kids are bilingual, but most of her grandkids aren't. But she definitely praises those that are. And she definitely comments a lot on, no entienden, no saben español, es que no entienden, no saben español. No saben. And then if she catches wind of like, ay, sí sabe, mira cómo se, ay, sí sabe, then so much praise. My mom realizes like if Isaiah talks to her fully in Spanish on a phone call, then there's so much praise. So I've had to do a lot of work with my own kids about like their self-worth. Like, it's not determined on being bilingual or not. It's like, I am wanting you to study the Spanish language for cultural connection. If you learn it, if you use it, great. If it's never going to happen for you, it's never going to happen for you. For me, I was the other side of it. I spoke Spanish and I got shit on for the way I spoke Spanish. Like, you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't. But Vero is absolutely right, spot on. I love that she shared that that sentiment so much, because so many parents feel guilt about the fact that their kids aren't bilingual. I know for a fact, I was look at you girls like this treasure, and I hold you on this pedestal like, oh, they taught their kids Spanish when they were growing up, it's so cute. I have comments all the time, and I had never even thought about how I might be making someone like me feel bad. I don't feel bad. I think that's great, and I wish I would have done it. But if someone's listening to this podcast and I'm praising you two for having done it, Vero brings up such a good point. Am I hurting those that didn't do it that way for whatever reason? Like, that's never been my intention. But see how we do that? We don't realize that sometimes we are
sin querer.
like glorifying one way and thinking that's the way, but everyone has their life. And why mine was simple. Diego and I were too lazy to speak both languages. Spanish's. That's the damn truth. We were too lazy. And now that I look back on it, thank God, because my Spanish was shittier back then, right? My Spanish has gotten so much better. Like, I really got to get it together with the youngest.
Dude, it's the podcast. Nos ayuda.
The podcast has helped tremendously. But see how it's like there's no right way is the point. That's the tip of the day, damn it. There's no right way. Go teach your kids freaking Japanese and forget the rest of us. My mom was asking me about all you girls yesterday. I was hanging out with her. I love her to death. I want to take her on a vacation. So today's her birthday. Happy birthday to my mama.
Happy birthday.
Hi, Mama Inés.
But she case of the no Sabo, she's the super Sabo because she knows everything. But she and I were talking about the kids, and we were talking about suddenly the girls came. A few girls came up because I think she said, oh, no. Steve asked about Nadia for some reason. We were talking about going to Guatemala or something. And he asked about Nadia, which is funny. And I'm telling about Nadia. Then my mom's like, is that the one that married the German? I'm like, no. How's she doing? And then I mentioned, she now has to obviously know Dutch and German and told the story of why Dutch and why German. And I go, she left her and she already knew English, Spanish, French, and Italian. And my brother's like, wait, what? What? My brother like walks back in from where he was like, how many languages does this friend of yours know? And I just thought that was so cool. That's the other side of the spectrum. You can't all be Sandrita. Shout out to her.
Right.
She knows so many languages, but imagine her trying to use all those languages. I'm sure she knows maybe 2 in excellence, the others in a varying degree. And this woman lives in Germany, married to a man that's Dutch. Like, that cannot be easy. And she speaks great Spanish.
Yes.
You don't know how you're going to end up and if you're going to win. So just love yourself. Tip of the day. There's no freaking right way.
We love you, Sandrucha.
Yeah, Sandrita, quick story on Sandrita. When she was interviewing for her like new jobs, she was like, my brain, she's like, I hadn't interviewed in a while.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
like, my brain was just like not working. She's like, obviously I speak all these different, let's say, for one moment I'm speaking, and I think I'm speaking in German, but the person looks really confused, and it turns out I was not speaking German. My brain just like flipped to another language, and I had no idea. So when I noticed that their face looked lost, she had to stop. But that can happen, and the beauty is that we are in a culture that is like todo inglés. Irene, does your mom speak English at all?
She does. She acts like she doesn't, but she does. It's all broken, but she does.
Okay. But maybe she's a little, like, my English isn't great, but my Spanish is where you can really get to my heart and you can really talk to me. So I think that our grandparents, our parents, like, the fact that that's what they know and that's how they can best communicate, they appreciated that someone of like our kids can speak it. So it's not her, I think, and not that I want to make it, put words in your mom's mouth, but I feel that to her, it's probably like, mira nomás, I can understand this kid and I can probably talk to them and like share my thoughts and my feelings with them, and they're going to understand me completely. And it feels good that I don't have to use my broken English to maybe say something that I don't even think I want to say or mean to say. And that's the beauty part of it. I think that's where, if we can, great. If we are not able to, fine. If our parents speak English and Spanish, then fine. Our kids can communicate them in any language. So it's apoyándolos to have just this love and appreciation of who you are, where you come from. And if it means you speak the language, great. And if not, it's okay. You can still be a proud ass Latino.
Yes.
And own it.
Yes. And then
Veto's dropping like gems today.
She is.
Everything Veto is saying.
I'm like,
y'all
naughty.
need to quote her today. La que no puede, la que dijo que mommy brain. That's such a beautiful gem. I'm sorry if I sound like I'm just like validating everything Veto says, but she's just like striking a freaking chord. My therapist used to say, when your mom says you don't call, what she's trying to say is, I miss you. Isn't that beautiful? I said it on the podcast. I love repeating it because, like, when people say what they say that seems like an insult, they're really trying to say the other thing. So if you can train your brain, like, oh, right. When my mom goes all in on the people that speak Spanish or all out on the people that don't speak Spanish, like, what she's really asking for is connection.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah.
Like,
yes.
Sítate con ella.
Yes.
Like, you know,
yes.
Anyway, pero
yes.
spot on, but
yes.
your brain to hear.
I love that.
What you're trying to say.
I love that. So I just wanted to add two cents to that. So my mom, I call her every day, or mostly every day, or I text my parents every day. Buenos días, this. And then when I'm driving home from work, I always call my mom. And dude, without a fail, within 5 minutes, siempre me dice algo de mi hermano, like, oh, o sea, no me ha hablado, or no ha venido. And I was like, tú también le puedes hablar, tú también le puedes mandar textos, And I think it finally sunk in because I was talking to my sister like 2 days ago. She's like, dude, my mom's been texting me en las mañanas todos los días. Buenos días. I was like, ay, qué bueno that it finally, sunk in because, yeah, like you're saying, it's her way of saying, que la extraña. And I get it. Like, she was so used to, like, my parents are so used to my sister and her kids, like, because they live with them y los vieron crecer, so they are so used to it. And I told them, like, es que por eso, like, no, nunca se van a dar la idea that you live separately. So it's like, es su manera de pedir esa atención y cariño. But anyway, I love
your sister, by the way. So proud of your sister, by the way.
Yeah.
Because that took a lot for her to move on. And like,
Yeah.
sometimes you feel like you have to stay with the people that have gotten used to, and they're raising your kids, you're raising them. It's like a collaborative community, but she really wanted her own life. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, and then they still, yeah, she's like the first one that gets called for, because ahí está. And so it's just like, it's that duty, like, look at that duty that she has ingrained in everything. But anyway, I think this was a beautiful discussion. I'm glad we are talking about it. I'm glad, I think, como estaban diciendo ustedes, no matter what level you are with your language, I think you should always be proud. I think we all speak it at different levels. Like, I feel like I speak it pretty well, but then I hear my husband, who went to school in Mexico, through like 8th grade, so lo habla mejor que yo, and then según yo en el trabajo, I feel like I speak it pretty well también, but then I hear my paralegal and our staff attorney, like, they speak it so beautifully, pero también ellos nacieron y estudiaron en México, ya vinieron como de teenagers, so it's just like, okay, yo no tuve esa, yo no tuve esa experiencia, so my experience is different, I think, bilingually. So I'm thinking, like, dude, si uno se confunde, like, siendo bilingual with just 2 English and Spanish, like, la pobre de Sandra, con razón, bueno, no la pobre, afortunada porque sabe todas esas lenguas. But anything else that you guys want to chime in about this, to end and conclude the case of the No Sabo kid?
No, yo soy muy bien con lo que platiqué. Estoy muy a gusto. That's my English for you guys right there.
I don't have anything to say either, but like, no sabo's not my problem. No se pena is my problem. I let that hide.
Dude, aquí no.
We've been thinking of video recording our podcast, por eso no podemos.
I know. Por eso no podemos, porque no nos ponemos las pilas.
No, I think it'll be so cool for people to see us just who we are.
Yeah, I think so too.
We will, who we
Así
are.
greñudas, sin cejas. I'm over here like, I was looking at my ventriloquist things. I'm just like, oh my God, look at this.
Oh my
look
God,
at this.
I have ventriloquist.
¿Saben qué tienen que hacer? ¿Saben qué tienen que hacer? And that's for another episode on self-care.
Take care of ourselves.
Yeah, un aceitito, the roller. I'm going to take a video of myself and then post it. Yeah, we do need a reunion. I'm coming soon in a month. I'm coming in this
ourselves. I love when we have coaching assessments. Oh yeah, you are coming soon. With people who listen to the podcast, it cracks me up. It cracks me up. I've been having so many assessments this week, and so a lot of times people find us on Google, so they don't know anything about us. They don't know our social media. They don't know us like that. So it's all like stiffy. But when they've listened to the podcast or listened for years, or like they'll even be like, I don't know, they'll just say the funniest things, and like they totally know things about us. That one girl yesterday, I was like, Ma, you probably know too much. She's like, no, it's okay. That's why I like it. That's why I want to finally do this. You know, like, you're not gonna judge me. This person told me, I always remember your story from the 99-cent store and how you couldn't decide what to pick and the struggle. And I'm like, oh, and this story was told like forever ago. Go back and listen if you don't know what I'm talking about. But it was in broke days. I had to pick between the peanut butter and the eggs. So that was when the 99-cent store really was 99 cents.
No, thank you, pandemic.
I know, dude.
Where was I going to shop in my poor days? No,
I used to go to the 99-cent store when I was in law school también.
We needed it, girl.
We needed it.
Where was it when we lived in Isla Vista?
I know, right? Because we read it. Because we freaking lived in, Santa Barbara. Por eso, no, allá no había.
Oh, I need underwear. Well, you can only go to Victoria's Secret. 5 for $25.
Love our stories and our craziness, and it doesn't matter what you sell. We're doing our best.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the case of the No Sabo kid today. If you want to keep the conversation or have your own comments about your experience, your kid's experience as the No Sabo kid, please chime in on our social media handles, Facebook and Instagram. Somos at Level Up Latina. Ya ni voy a mencionar el otro porque no one really is on there anymore. But the other way to get a hold of us is through email. Our email is admin@leveluplatina, y también via our website, leveluplatina.com. También that's the perfect place to get your tickets for the Breakthrough Brunch happening in a month on October the 7th. It's a Saturday. Be there or be square. Se la van a pasar increíble. Lots of yummy food, great panelists, raffles, y sorpresitas. So we hope to see you there. También check out our affiliates on our website. We have lots of great companies supporting our endeavors, como La Macy's, SodaStream if you like your sparkling water, Virgin Wines, Mario Badescu Skincare. So check it out, por favor, y apóyanos. Also, don't forget to leave a review if you love listening to our podcast. Just anywhere that you listen to your podcast, make sure you give us 5 stars and write a cool review for us. So we appreciate you. Thank you for listening. Gracias, chulas, por estar aquí. Thank you. That's a wrap. Besitos.